Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Now, today we're going to discuss the Kelly-Hopkinsville encounter. This encounter is of extraterrestrial and UFO nature, involving a family named the Suttons and some of their friends. Now, they claim to have experienced a series of intense encounters with what they described as small creatures that stood about 3 feet tall, that had large heads with big sharp pointed ears and glowing yellow eyes. The climax of their encounter led to the Suttons engaging in a shootout with the creatures. Were these creatures actually of extraterrestrial origin? I'm going to attempt to unravel this story and explain it to all of you the best I can, and provide my own conclusion by the end as I do with all of my videos. So, without further ado, join me as we step back to August of 1955 in the sleepy town of Kelly, Kentucky. Also, real quick, if you like the videos and what I'm doing here, why not like and subscribe? That tells me that you all are enjoying the videos, and I really appreciate it. But now, let's talk about some aliens. Now, the Kelly-Hopkinsville encounter took place on August 21st, 1955. But before we delve into this specific encounter, I kind of want to go over the atmosphere surrounding the UFO and extraterrestrial phenomena in America in the mid-20th century. So in June of 1947, during the early Cold War and nuclear anxieties, pilot Kenneth Arnold saw 9 shiny, unidentified flying objects over Mount Rainier in Washington state. His sighting, considered the first post-World War II UFO sighting in the US, led to numerous additional reports. However, many of these subsequent sightings were likely imitations or fabrications, and it was Kenneth's sighting that eventually popularized the term flying saucer. About a week after Kenneth's sighting in Corona, New Mexico, rancher W.W. Mac Brazel stumbled upon scattered debris over a wide area. Now, Mac was unaware of the ongoing flying saucer sightings, but he learned about them when he went to town on July 5th. Intrigued, he collected some debris and brought it to the sheriff's office on July 7th. The sheriff then contacted the Roswell Army Airfield, located about 100 miles away. That debris eventually was collected on July 8th. Now, initially, the Roswell Army Airfield described it as remnants of a flying object or a disc in a press release, but they were quick to retract the statement and claimed it was nothing but a weather balloon. Now, on July 4th, 1947, the crew members aboard the United Airlines Flight 105 had a remarkable encounter during their flight from Boise, Idaho to Pendleton, Oregon. They claimed to have witnessed what they called 4 or 5 somethings, and promptly radioed the air tower in Ontario, Oregon to report the sighting. Now, the crew observed the crafts for about 45 miles before they vanished. Now, the crew aboard the Flight 105 had differing opinions on whether they disappeared at high speed or they disintegrated. On board the flight were 8 passengers, but none of them saw the crafts because, according to the crew, the crafts were placed directly in front of the plane for the entire sighting. Now, when this flight reported these sightings, the Air Force completely dismissed the claims, attributing them to nothing but ordinary aircraft, balloons, birds, or what they call pure illusion. Shortly after, Captain Smith and co-pilot Ralph Stevens teamed up with Kenneth Arnold to investigate other potential UFO sightings. What's interesting, however, is that approximately 3 weeks later, on July 29, 1947, another aircrew on Flight 105 also reported encountering multiple UFOs. Now, Kenneth's original sighting in 1947 sparked concern and prompted the establishment of Project Sign by the U.S. Air Force. Project Sign aimed to investigate UFOs and assess potential security threats they might possess. After a year, Project Sign was replaced by Project Grudge, which roughly had similar objectives, and that operated from 1948 to 1951. In 1952, Project Blue Book was initiated as an improved version of both Sign and Grudge, aiming to provide comprehensive answers to the UFO phenomenon. Project Blue Book would go on to continue until 1969, in which it collected 12,618 UFO reports. The Air Force attributed many sightings to misidentifications, but 701 of these reports remain unexplained and classified until the Freedom of Information Act in 1967 allowed for their release. During the late 1940s and early 1950s in America, there were numerous UFO sightings, but encounters with extraterrestrials themselves were rare. The Kelly-Hopkinsville encounter stands out because it involves both a UFO and an extraterrestrial encounter. However, a similar incident occurred 3 years earlier in Flatwoods, West Virginia, which is my home state. So in 1952, three boys claimed to have witnessed a bright object land on a nearby property. They shared their story with others, including Eugene Lemon, who was a West Virginia National Guardsman at the time. The group ventured to the location and encountered a humanoid like creature with a red, hood like face, metallic clothing, claw like hands, and long, thin arms. The witnesses stated the creature then emitted a hissing sound and glided towards them, causing the group to flee in fear. This creature would later be known as the Flatwoods Monster, and I'm going to stop this story here because I intend to make a Flatwoods Monster deep dive at some point in the future. So, as should be obvious, by 1955, which is the year of the Kelly-Hopkinsville encounter, the concept of UFOs and extraterrestrials had already started to firmly embed itself in the collective consciousness of the people in the United States. So, now that we have explored the general consensus and attitude towards these phenomena leading up to that warm evening of August 21st, 1955, let's delve into what transpired at that farmhouse in Kelly, Kentucky, involving the Sutton family and their friends. The farmhouse where this takes place belonged to Mrs. Glennie Langford. At the time of the encounter, Glennie had recently become widowed when her second husband, Oscar Langford, passed away. Glennie had multiple children with both of her husbands, as this was during the baby boom in America after World War II. With Oscar Langford, she had three children: Lonnie, aged 12, Charlton, aged 10, and Mary Langford, aged 7. With Tillman Sutton, who was her first husband, she had two children: Elmer, or Lucky Sutton, who was 25 at the time, and John Charlie, or J.C. Sutton, who was 21 at the time. J.C.'s wife, Aline Sutton, age 27 at the time, her brother, O.P. Baker, who was 30, and Lucky's wife, Vera Sutton, who was 29, were also present at the farmhouse that night. Lucky and Vera both worked as traveling carnival workers and had invited two of their co-workers, Billy Ray Taylor, who was 21, and his wife, June Taylor, who was 18, to join them for the evening. So, all in all, 11 people were in attendance at Glennie's farmhouse that night. After the group finished dinner that night, they attempted to find means of keeping themselves and each other entertained. The women kept themselves cleaning the kitchen and washing the dishes, while the men played cards and told stories, while the children played games around the house. After a couple hours, boredom started to set in for Billy Ray Taylor, and he headed to the kitchen to find something to drink. And, before we assume, I just want to make it clear that there was no alcohol present in the farmhouse. Reason being, Glennie Langford was a staunchly religious woman, and actually forbid any alcohol from entering her home. So, the next best option was water. However, the farmhouse did not have access to running water, but there was a well present in the backyard of the farmhouse. So, around 7 p.m. that night, Billy Ray Taylor grabbed a bucket from inside the home, walked out the back door, and made his way to the well. He then placed the bucket under the spout and began pumping the water. Now, as the bucket filled, he glanced up at the night sky and noticed something pretty strange. According to Billy Ray, a streak of light caught his attention, moving steadily towards the farmhouse. As this light drew near, he noticed a large disc-shaped object with a trail of bright lights behind it. He said this odd disc shape was also accompanied by a loud hissing sound. He then said the object flew over the farmhouse and vanished behind a nearby tree line, which was located less than a quarter of a mile away from the farmhouse. Now, even though the light had disappeared from behind the tree line, Billy Ray claimed he could still see the illumination coming from behind the trees. And given the prevailing fascination with UFOs during that time, Billy Ray was familiar with these stories and accounts of similar crafts. Possibly, he could have become convinced that he had witnessed a genuine UFO sighting. Excitedly, he hurried back to the house to share his experience with the others. After re-entering the house, Billy Ray exclaimed that he had just witnessed a flying saucer soaring over the house and disappearing into the tree line. The entire group just gazed at Billy Ray with disbelief, unable to comprehend his claim. It was Lucky Sutton, Billy Ray's friend and co-worker, who broke the silence, questioning if Billy Ray had, quote, gone plumb crazy. Billy Ray was quick to reply by saying,
"No, I know what I saw, and I'm sure it is one of those flying saucers they've been talking about."
After this, it seems as if a heated exchange ensued, with accusations being thrown at Billy Ray for getting spooked by a mere shooting star. Obviously, Billy Ray believed he had seen a UFO, so he was rather frustrated and continued to mutter about his certainty of seeing a UFO. Eventually, though, these tensions subsided and a brief moment of quiet settled in. This peace would be very short-lived. Only an hour after the argument had ended, the whole group was then startled by the sound of loud barking outside the home. Glennie owned 2 dogs at the farmhouse, and while the initial surprise caught their attention, nobody really thought much of it. They assumed the dogs had simply spotted a deer or some other sort of woodland creature, dismissing it as a common occurrence in rural Kentucky. However, the barking continued and grew more intense, which eventually piqued Lucky's curiosity. He decided to investigate the source of the commotion and find out what was causing the dogs to be so agitated. Billy Ray joined Lucky as he ventured outside, and to their surprise, as soon as they stepped out, both dogs cowered in fear, tucking their tails and scurrying underneath the farmhouse for safety. Confused by the dog's behavior, Billy Ray and Lucky exchanged confused glances and turned their attention towards the direction the dogs were barking in. And in the dim light under a cluster of trees, they made out a silhouette of a humanoid-like figure. Intrigued, the 2 men then fixed their eyes upon the mysterious being, attempting to understand its true nature. As the creature appeared to take notice of Billy Ray and Lucky's presence, a sense of urgency and fear compelled them to quickly step back into the home, quickly shutting the door behind them and locking it. Once they were back inside, they relayed the startling encounter to the rest of the family. In response, J.C. Sutton sort of took charge and armed himself with a 20-gauge shotgun, which then he provided Lucky with a 12-gauge double-barrel shotgun and Billy Ray with a 22 caliber rifle. Now, feeling armed and prepared, the men ventured back onto the porch, determined to confront the mysterious creature they had just seen. As they focused their gaze upon the creature and got a better look at it, their eyes were met with a truly terrifying sight and a figure that would shake them to their core. What they saw was a creature that stood at a mere height of 3 to 4 feet tall. It had a large head with prominent pointed ears that seemed almost sharp to the touch. It also had eerie glowing eyes with a yellowish color and were situated on the sides of its head. The creature had long, slender arms that hung low and nearly touched the ground, with hands at the end with elongated, webbed fingers that kind of came into a claw-like shape. Surprisingly, its short legs appeared to serve no purpose, as witnesses claimed the creatures hovered above the ground. Adding to its otherworldly sort of appearance, the creature's body emitted a subtle luminescence. Now, the creature sort of was making a steady advance towards the house, and there was almost a moment of tension in the air. Then, unexpectedly, the creature lifted its elongated arms above its head, which, of course, captured the attention of both Billy Ray and Lucky. Sensing that this might be some sort of threat, they instinctively raised their weapons, ready to defend themselves. As the 2 men were about to fire, Glennie suddenly emerged from the house and pleaded with them not to open fire on the creature. Later, Glennie would say she did this because she did not feel as if the creatures meant harm to her and her family. Both the men, however, ignored Glennie and stepped off the porch into the front yard to confront the creature. When the creature approached to within approximately 20 feet of the house, Billy Ray and Lucky fired their weapons at it. However, the initial shots appeared to have no effect on the creature, and the men noted that the bullets hitting the creature produced a odd, distinct, sort of metallic ricochet sound. One of the shots seemed to elicit an unusual response from the creature, where upon being struck it performed a maneuver resembling a backflip, and then gracefully landed in an upright position, but still hovering above the ground. The creature then turned around towards the woods and retreated by running off into the woods. Once that creature had vanished from their sight, Billy Ray and Lucky cautiously inspected the surroundings of the house for approximately 5 minutes, ensuring that the creature had truly departed before finally re-entering the house. Now, Billy Ray, Lucky, and JC were all dismayed by the sheer ineffectiveness of their firepower against this creature, prompting a rightful sense of unease amongst the group. After seeking safety and regrouping, everyone convened in the living room except for the younger children, whom Glennie had instructed to seek refuge under their beds when the shooting began. At this point, the family engaged in a sort of discussion about the recent encounter, and started to devise a plan in case the creature decided to return. To their shock, one of the creatures then appeared outside one of the windows of the home. JC raised his 20-gauge shotgun rather quickly and fired a shot through the window. The impact seemed to hit the creature, which also caused this one to perform this sort of backflip maneuver and land in the upright position as the other one did. After this, Billy Ray seized the opportunity and also took a shot at this same creature, but both men were totally unsure if they had actually hit the target. Now determined and armed again, Billy Ray and Lucky ventured onto the porch to conduct another perimeter check. Lucky descended into the front yard while Billy Ray followed closely behind him. However, just as Billy Ray was about to step off the porch, the group inside witnessed something rather horrifying. What they saw was a long, clawed hand reach down from the overhang roof, attempting to grab Billy Ray's head. The startled group sort of just froze in fear and erupted into screams. But Aline Sutton rushed out onto the porch, quickly pulling Billy Ray to safety before the creature could grab hold of him. Lucky advanced a few more steps into the yard, which he then got a clear view of the creature perched on the roof of the house. So, without hesitation, he raised the shotgun and unleashed another shot, which struck the creature with such force that it was shot all the way off the roof over the top of it. Once Lucky was sure that the creature was off of the roof, he said the coast was clear and Billy Ray joined him back in the front yard to help re-engage. After a minute or so, Billy Ray noticed an unusual figure perched in a nearby tree. At first, he didn't know if this was one of the creature, but he soon focused his eyes on it and realized it was one of these other creatures. So, without hesitation, Billy Ray and Lucky again directed their fire at the creature in the tree, delivering shots that knocked it from its position. Now, as the creature descended, Billy Ray and Lucky noticed something rather strange. When this creature fell, it sort of defied the laws of gravity that we know. And what they said was the creature seemed to kind of float down to the ground instead of just falling like a person would. However, after this short little floating motion that the creature did, it also stood back up on its feet. Well, I mean, not really its feet because it just sort of floated above the ground, but it got in its upright position and also ran back out into the woods out of sight. After the one that they shot out of the tree, it was about 20 minutes since that one had been seen. But dread had started to set in for Billy Ray, Lucky, and all the persons present that night because it was becoming very, very clear that their firearms were not enough to repel these invaders. Just then, another creature appeared on the roof of the house, and once again, the men blasted it off the roof. This time, the blast was strong enough to knock the creature nearly 40 feet back off of the roof, and it slowly floated down onto the top of a fence in the yard. Both men pursued the creature around the house and noticed that it was now resting on the fence. They then shot it off that fence, and it too got in its upright position and ran off. After that, things calmed down for a while, and at that point, both men felt comfortable to go back inside the home. The women, however, were all huddled together, and the children were still hiding under their beds. As doubts crept into the minds of some of these adults, they couldn't help but question whether the children were somehow responsible for these events. However, since the very first creature had appeared, the children had remained sheltered under their beds, ruling out any possibility of their involvement in a prank or practical joke. Those thoughts wouldn't last very long, as the sound of footsteps could now be heard along the roof of the house. Glennie happened to look out a window of the front yard. Glennie looked out a window to the front yard and noticed another one of the creatures slowly making its way towards the house. Billy Ray wasted no time, and he flung the front door open and fired the .22 rifle through the screen door, once again sending the creature flying backwards in the upright position and ran off. That's just how they leave the situation. As the night went on, the creatures continued to advance towards the house and made multiple appearances, and anytime that one of them made their presence known, the men responded by firing upon them. As this was happening, Glennie still tried to argue with the men that the creatures didn't seem to be there to hurt them. However, with children present at the home, the men weren't going to take any chances without knowing what these things are capable of. The people in the home estimated that there may have been anywhere from 10 to 15 of these creatures, or some also thought it could just be 2 or 3 making multiple appearances. With it seeming as if this siege was never going to end, fear started to set in, and the idea that this encounter could possibly take a more serious turn was becoming a real possibility. At this point, when we're at in the story, the battle had been going for nearly 3 hours, and the men's gunfire had damaged the walls, windows, and screens of the home. So, around 11 p.m., the group decided that they needed professional help to deal with the invaders. Billy Ray and Lucky's vehicles were both parked outside, so everyone packed their most important items and hurried to the cars. All members of the house made it to the cars without encountering another creature, at which point they set off towards Hopkinsville, which was located about nearly 8 miles away, where the closest police station was situated. When the party arrived at the police station, they quickly rushed inside and informed the first officer they encountered about the events that had transpired that night. Billy Ray recounted witnessing the disc landing in the woods earlier that evening and described the prolonged battle they had endured for hours against the extraterrestrial creatures. Billy Ray informed the officer that he had gone through 4 whole boxes of 22 shells, while both JC and Lucky Sutton claimed to have used several boxes of shotgun shells. The men explained how the invaders appeared impervious to any ammunition and expressed their fear that the situation could worsen, emphasizing the need for the assistance of law enforcement. Now, I also must say here, Billy Ray, Lucky, JC, all these people were your typical kind of woodsy rural folk, and they were not one to usually call on law enforcement for situations like these. This was a family that was a very solve your own problems type of people, if you can get what I'm saying. Now, the officers at the station were shocked by the story they were hearing because it seemed incredibly insane and unbelievable. However, the group in front of them all shared the same story and experience, and the intense state of hysteria displayed by the families convinced the officer that even if they hadn't seen aliens, they must have witnessed something that deeply disturbed them. Also, since there was active fire at the house, like gunfire at the house, the police had to get involved because they were also worried that it might have just been 2 sort of redneck rural families having a shootout with each other and not aliens. The Hopkinsville Chief of Police, Russell Greenwell, and the Deputy Sheriff for Christian County, which Kelly and Hopkinsville were in, their Deputy Sheriff, George Batts, gathered information and statements from all the witnesses. After taking these statements for nearly 45 minutes, they determined that they had collected enough information, so Greenwell and Batts instructed an officer at the station to put out a call for any additional units. After the officer made the call, he asked Greenwell,
"Do you want me to call the Air Force to see if we can get air support?"
To which Russell responded,
"No, we don't know what we are up against. But if we need them, we can call them later. You might see if Fort Campbell has anyone they can send to assist. Also, make sure everyone brings along extra rifles or shotguns, and don't forget extra ammunition. We don't know how much firepower these things may have on board that machine they're flying."
When the call went out, word quickly spread about the encounter. In response, a squad of 17 officers was formed and were en route to the farmhouse in Kelly. The Suttons and their companions arrived back home shortly after midnight, closely followed by the large squadron of officers. Somehow, the news media had been tipped off and they too descended on the farmhouse. It is estimated that nearly 30 people were present on the property at this time. The police initiated their investigation shortly after their arrival around midnight, and their initial question was, could it be possible that these people were drinking tonight? However, the police were unable to find any evidence to support that claim, and additionally, the officers who were present at the Hopkinsville police station when the group entered denied seeing any clear indication that any of them had been intoxicated. Given the description that these creatures appeared to hover above the ground as they moved around, the police were unable to find any footprints that could have possibly been left behind. And as the police examined the property further, they discovered empty shells from the firearms used by Lucky and Billy Ray. However, according to the later evidence report for that night, only the front door screen had clear evidence of a bullet hole. The investigators also made an interesting discovery in the front yard. Near the fence where one of the creatures had landed, the investigators found a glowing, luminescent green stain on the ground. However, none of the investigators considered this stain as evidence, and they did not collect a sample for further examination. After all this, it was nearly 2 a.m., and both the police and press agents started to leave the property. Law enforcement intended to resume their investigation the following day, taking advantage of the daylight. So, the farmhouse and its surroundings were now free from the presence of the police and the media. Exhausted from the night's terror and excitement, the occupants of the house eagerly sought some much-needed rest. Well, understandably, however, the group was still quite shaken up from what they had just experienced, and as a result, most of them, including Mrs. Glennie Langford, found it impossible to sleep that night. At around 3:30 a.m., Glennie became convinced that she heard something walking above her on the roof of the house. She discreetly alerted everyone else, expressing her belief that she had heard something strange. That was the moment when Glennie looked outside her bedroom window and noticed the eerie luminescent glow of yet another creature attempting to peer inside the home. When Glennie noticed this figure, she called out to the rest of the family, and Lucky, who had not yet slept and remained vigilant since the departure of the police, immediately responded upon hearing his mother's call about another one of these creatures. Lucky quickly grabbed his shotgun again, and despite Glennie's plea not to fire since the creature still appeared to be merely curious, Lucky disregarded her and fired anyways. The shot shattered the window and propelled the creature backward just as they had before. The families then found themselves engaged in yet another battle with the creatures, which lasted until about 5:15 in the morning. At that point, the family said that the creatures seemed to have abruptly vanished and disappeared without any trace. Sometime after that, a group of policemen arrived at the house to conduct another investigation. Upon their arrival, the family informed the police that Billy Ray and Lucky had left for Evansville, Indiana that morning. Evansville was a little more than an hour drive from Kelly, and the men had gone there to borrow a truck for moving some furniture out of the farmhouse. After the harrowing nightmare Glennie had endured the previous night, she no longer felt comfortable living in that home with the younger children. The police continued their investigation, but still found no evidence of footprints, nor could they locate the previously seen luminous green stain in the yard. Additionally, the police found no evidence to support any claims of the family being intoxicated, which completely ruled out that aspect from the story. Unfortunately for the Suttons, the press that had been present the previous night wasted no time in publishing the story, and word spread rapidly about the alleged invasion. Over the following days, numerous press agents, radio hosts, curious onlookers, and UFO enthusiasts descended upon the house. Unfortunately, some of these individuals were not only rude to the family, but also reportedly began intruding into the home and stealing objects from both in and around the home. They claimed to have taken these objects because it was at the site of a UFO encounter, so it could be evidence. Now, some of these individuals were rude to the family simply because they believed the family had fabricated the story to gain attention and possibly monetary gain. On the flip side, there was individuals who were also rude in their invasiveness because they genuinely believed the story. Regarding the aspect of monetary gain, the Suttons and their companions had nothing to gain by fabricating this story. In fact, as we will see later on, most of them regretted being a part of this story and were left heavily traumatized by both the events and the subsequent backlash they faced from the events. At that time, the only direct involvement of the family in publicity was a photo of Billy Ray and Lucky Sutton posing with their firearms, attempting to reenact the shootout for the Kentucky New Era newspaper. The precise timing and dates of certain events following the initial encounter are somewhat challenging to find, but at some point a man named Andrew Bud Ledwith arrived at the property. Andrew was the radio host for a local radio show out of Hopkinsville, and was also a major UFO enthusiast. Unlike those who came before him, Andrew displayed kindness and empathy towards the family. And Andrew displayed genuine curiosity about the encounter and conducted interviews with nearly all the members of the house, questioning them about their experiences. The only people he didn't question were the younger children that were hiding under the beds. Andrew possessed great artistic skills and was highly proficient in drawing and sketching. During his interview with Billy Ray regarding the supposed craft he had witnessed, Andrew produced a sketch that closely matched Billy Ray's description. Similarly, when it came to the creatures that had attempted to besiege the house that night, the descriptions provided by almost every member of the household were consistent, and Andrew created a sketch of those creatures as well. Regarding these creatures, the media had begun referring to them simply as the Men, but a headline in the Indianapolis Star-Print referred to them as Little Green Men. Despite the family's description of the creatures having silver, almost metallic-looking skin, the name Little Green Men stuck. Sadly, the majority of the people the family interacted with regarding the encounter were not as understanding as Andrew, and instead continued to harass them. Within a mere 10 days, this event completely upended their lives, particularly for Glennie Langford. As mentioned earlier, Glennie no longer felt secure residing in the house with her children, uncertain of whether or not the creatures would return. However, the relentless harassment and malicious accusations continued, and on the 10th day, Glennie made the decision to move out of the farmhouse and into an apartment in Hopkinsville. She hoped that by leaving the farmhouse, she would find safety not only from the creatures, but also from the individuals who had since defiled her home. Billy Ray, Lucky Sutton, along with their wives and the other adults, returned to their respective homes with their families, striving to move forward and put behind them the harrowing events that took place on that fateful summer night of August 21st, 1955. Unlike those directly involved, the towns of Kelly and Hopkinsville chose to disregard and dismiss the entire ordeal, attributing it to nothing more than a figment of the imagination of a group of rural folks who were perhaps influenced by the consumption of Kentucky moonshine or whiskey. The events of that fateful night gradually faded into obscurity and perhaps would have been lost to history if not for one woman, Isabel Davis. Isabel Davis was a UFO investigator from New York City, and she arrived in Hopkinsville of June of 1956, which was approximately 10 months after the encounter had taken place. Isabel learned that 3 of the witnesses from the Kelly incident were still residing in Hopkinsville, that being J.C. Sutton, his wife Aline Sutton, and Mrs. Glennie Langford. Upon learning this, Isabel felt excited, believing that she had struck gold and would finally uncover the truth of what had happened on that night. However, according to Isabel Davis, these 3 individuals had become, quote, embittered and resentful due to the negativity and ridicule they had faced because of the story. As a result, they were not particularly enthusiastic about speaking to Isabel about the incident, since she intended to publish an article about it. Although reluctantly, Glennie did go on to agree to share some details of the events of that night with Isabel, although she did not disclose everything. After bidding farewell to Glennie, Isabel headed to the local police station in search of Russell Greenwell, who was the Hopkinsville chief of police who had been involved in the initial investigation. Fortunately for Isabel, Greenwell was still serving as the active chief and proved to be extremely helpful to Isabel's investigation. He provided her with crucial information regarding the initial investigation and even arranged for her to be transported to the farmhouse where the encounter had taken place. Upon Isabel's arrival at the farmhouse, she was greeted by a woman named Mrs. Juanita McCord, who was the current occupant of the property, along with her husband, who happened to remain unnamed in the report. Isabel later learned that Mrs. McCord's husband was actually the nephew of Mrs. Glennie Langford, which provided a familial connection to the encounter. Mr. and Mrs. McCord were willing to share their perspective on the encounter with Isabel, even though they were not directly involved in the event. Their comments were considered valuable because of their familial connection to Glennie Langford, who obviously was a key witness. It was also said that Glennie was tight-knit with her family, and it pretty much suggests that Glennie would have likely shared the details of this encounter with any of her relatives. After that, Isabel sought to interview Bud Ledwith, who was obviously the radio host who had produced the sketches, based on the descriptions given by Billy Ray and the other witnesses. She recognized his importance in capturing visual representations of the alleged craft and creatures. Bud also proved to be a valuable resource for Isabel, as he not only shared copies of the sketches, but also provided her with written notes from his own investigation and the interviews he did with the family. Now, while these were all important witnesses, Isabel found Mrs. Glennie Langford to be the most significant witness among all of them. Despite being described as somber, Glennie was deeply respected and loved by all of those who knew her. She was known for her honesty and sincerity, and was not the type to engage in pranks or make up stories. Her reputation for being a truthful woman made her account of the events that transpired that night all the more compelling to Isabel. Before Isabel left Hopkinsville to return to New York, she made a visit to Mrs. Langford's apartment to offer any apologies for any intrusion she might have caused in her investigation. Now, to Isabel, it was quite evident that Glennie Langford did not relish in revisiting the events that had shattered her life, her family's life, and shattered their reputations within their community. But Isabel wanted to express her understanding and respect for the hardships Glennie had endured as a result of the encounter. Although Mrs. Langford did not explicitly accept Isabel's apology, she appeared to be somewhat touched by Isabel's genuine nature and respectful attitude, which she told Isabel many previous investigators had lacked. Now, Isabel's investigation played a crucial role in clarifying some of the misconceptions surrounding the Kelly Hopkinsville encounter. Her report helped dispel the false claims that the family had been intoxicated during the event, as Chief Greenwell had already ruled out any evidence of alcohol consumption. Additionally, Mrs. Langford's account corrected the exaggerated claims of seeing 12 to 15 creatures, clarifying that there were no more than 4 present during the encounter. By presenting these accurate details, Isabel's investigation provided a more objective and reliable account of the events, helping to set the record straight and challenge the sensationalized narratives that had circulated in the media. However, unfortunately, Isabel's report wouldn't become publicly available until 1973, which was 18 years after the initial encounter and 17 years after Isabel's investigation. And while I would like to believe that Isabel's report may have provided clarity and helped put an end to the slander campaign against the Suttons, I doubt that would have been the case even if it had been released earlier than 1973. When it comes to paranormal study, particularly within the field of ufology, fabrications, dramatization, miscommunication, and smear campaigns are unfortunately common occurrences. Despite Isabel's comprehensive report, which is available online and chronicled in her book Close Encounters at Kelly and Others of 1955, it still holds a similar standing to the numerous other reports and stories surrounding this encounter. Now, for anyone curious, Isabel's report was published by the Center for UFO Studies, or CUFOS, which was founded and headed by J. Allen Hynek. For most UFO enthusiasts, the name J. Allen Hynek is significant as he is the renowned figure. He is, well, not the renowned figure, but he is a renowned figure in UFO research, particularly due to his involvement in Project Blue Book. Dr. Hynek was hired by the Air Force during the early stages of the project, which initially started as Project Sign, and later involved in Project Grudge before becoming Project Blue Book, as we discussed in the beginning part of this video. However, I can't go too far on the story of Hynek, or we'll be here all day discussing his history with the paranormal and the nature of UFOs. However, it is important to note that while Project Blue Book had a case for the Kelly Hopkinsville encounter, which I'll discuss in just a moment, and Isabel's report was published via CUFOS, Hynek himself never conducted an investigation on this case. As for Project Blue Book's investigation, it is rather anticlimactic and lacking an explanation, and they simply classified the case as a hoax and provided no further elaboration. Now, so far I've withheld the common alternative name for this case, which is the Hopkinsville Goblin case. The exact origin of this name is sort of difficult to track down, but it likely emerged sometime after the creatures were initially referred to as little green men. The use of the term goblins to describe the creatures in the Hopkinsville encounter might have been chosen to portray the Suttons as foolish or to downplay the seriousness of their account. However, it is pretty funny, and it is worth noting that the description of these creatures do bear some resemblance to popular depictions of goblins in folklore and mythology. Now, I think it goes without saying, but the aftermath of the Hopkinsville encounter had a profound impact on the Sutton family and those who were present that night. The relentless harassment and ridicule they faced took a toll on their mental and emotional well-being. J.C. Sutton, in particular, was deeply affected by the events and struggled to cope with the trauma from the encounter. His ability to maintain steady employment was severely hindered, and he reportedly suffered from emotional distress for the remainder of his life. The long-lasting effects of such a terrifying experience and the subsequent negative reaction from others are just unfortunate consequences that the family had to endure. Life, however, continued in Kentucky, and now the Hopkinsville Goblins are a part of the state's paranormal history. As is the case with many UFO, cryptid, and paranormal encounters, these goblins have had a significant influence on pop culture, and I'd like to share some of those inspirations with you now. In the late 1970s, Steven Spielberg began working on a film project called Night Skies. The film was intended to be based on the Kelly Hopkinsville encounter and was meant to follow his previous work, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Both Close Encounters and the concept for Night Skies were conceived after Spielberg had met Dr. J. Allen Hynek. Night Skies was eventually abandoned, but certain elements of the story were incorporated into films like Poltergeist and E.T. the Extraterrestrial. In 1986, the comedy horror spoof movie Critters loosely drew inspiration from this encounter. However, in this movie, the creatures are depicted as violent and aggressive, in contrast to the originally described curious nature of the Goblins. In 2002, Pokemon and Nintendo released Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, marking the third generation of the Pokemon card in video games. This installment introduced an additional 135 Pokemon to the roster. Interestingly, one of these new Pokemon, Sableye, bears a striking resemblance to the Goblins except for its coloration. As the video game series later transitioned to 3D animation styles, Sableye acquired an awkward swaying gait and walk, which closely resembles the reported movements of the Goblins. And while it merely may be coincidental, one of Sableye's cards features an illustration of it perched in a tree, reminiscent of one of the Goblins during the encounter. That brings us to 2005, which marked the 50th anniversary of the encounter, and the towns of Kelly and Hopkinsville desired to commemorate the occasion. They extended an invitation to Geraldine Stith, who was formerly known as Geraldine Sutton, to speak at the event. Geraldine was the daughter of Lucky Sutton, who was born almost 14 years after the encounter took place. Lucky didn't disclose the details of that night to his children until a pair of UFO researchers and authors arrived at his doorstep in 1969, questioning him about the event. Now, when Geraldine attended the 50th anniversary ceremony of the encounter, she was taken aback by the significant amount of misinformation being shared by the attendees. The inaccuracies were so prevalent that many didn't even have the correct names of the witnesses. Since then, Geraldine has been determined to reveal the actual truth of the story and put an end to the inaccuracies surrounding the ordeal her family experienced that night. Geraldine has went to great lengths and published 2 separate books on the encounter herself. The first book was titled Alien Legacy and was published in 2005, which was followed by the book The Kelly Greenman Alien Legacy Revisited in 2015. Now, in 2010, when Kelly was struggling to generate ideas for a fundraiser event, they turned to their intriguing history and chose to theme the event around the Kelly Hopkinsville encounter. The fundraiser was named the Little Green Men Days Festival and has evolved into an annual celebration in Kelly. Geraldine Stith does continue to be a regular speaker at the event, and Geraldine expresses her surprise at the countless individuals who approach her, claiming to have had similar encounters and sightings as her father did in 1955. Furthermore, regarding the enduring impact of certain slander campaigns and the judgment faced by the family, Geraldine still encounters individuals who continue to harbor doubt and resentment towards her father and all those who were present that night. Geraldine quickly corrects these people and mentions that some even disagree with Billy Ray and Lucky's aggressive response to the creatures. In response, Geraldine says,
"My dad was trying to protect them. They were country boys, and that's what they knew to do, get their guns. My family went through something, whether it be paranormal or extraterrestrial, that changed their lives forever. I just want people to realize the terror they went through that night."
Now, as of 2023, and of me writing this outline, it appears that the Little Green Men Days Festival has suffered significant setbacks due to the pandemic and has consequently been canceled for the past few years. Hopefully, though, the people of Kelly can once again unite and find solace in their shared fascination with the paranormal and the extraordinary. Now that we have extensively covered the history of the Kelly Hopkinsville encounter, let's quickly go over the most plausible, non-paranormal explanation for both the craft witnessed by Billy Ray, but also the appearance of the Goblins themselves. The prevailing explanation suggests that it was a case of misidentified natural phenomena combined with heightened fear and imagination. Let's delve into the craft first. As we discussed earlier and throughout the video, 1955 marked a significant period of UFO interest and sightings in the United States. The prevalence of such reports was so high that Billy Ray Taylor was well acquainted with the phenomenon. When he relayed his sighting of the craft to the rest of the family, he specifically mentioned having had seen, quote, one of those flying saucers they've been talking about. This aspect undeniably raises the possibility that maybe Billy Ray had just inadvertently convinced himself that he had witnessed a UFO, when in fact he'd seen nothing more than a shooting star. To that point, it is worth noting that there was indeed a meteor shower that occurred in that region of Kentucky on that particular night, which was reported by multiple individuals, including military personnel, stationed at the nearby Fort Campbell. It's crucial to consider both the pros and cons when evaluating the shooting star meteor shower theory as a potential alternative for the observed phenomenon during the encounter. So right now we're going to go over those pros and cons, and for the pros, it's going to be in support of the misidentification. So these pros are going to be in support of the shooting star, and obviously the cons will be against it. So, as for the pros, there is historical and astronomical evidence supporting the presence of an active meteor shower during Billy Ray's sighting. As mentioned just a moment ago, this specific meteor shower was observed by multiple individuals, including military personnel, which lends some credibility to the claim. We also can't look over the fact that, regrettably, the misidentification of shooting stars and meteors as UFOs is a pretty common occurrence that still happens to this day. So let's go to the cons, with Billy Ray's description of the craft slowly hovering above the house and appearing to land in a nearby field clearly is not something a shooting star would do. Also, according to Billy Ray's description, the craft had a trail of lights closely following behind it and emitted a low hum-like noise, which means that he would have had to been in close proximity to notice these two things. So at this point, I'm going to start getting a little wacky, a little wiggity woo, and then maybe end up going off the rails. I'm going to try to stay somewhat composed. But let's say, for the sake of this next argument, let's entertain a hypothetical scenario where the supposed craft is actually just a shooting star, but the creatures are actually goblins or extraterrestrials, whatever you want to call them. Hypothetically speaking, wouldn't it be an incredible coincidence that on a specific night, in a specific location, where the meteor shower was visible, alien visitors would choose to invade that particular place at that particular time? Now, I will further explain and explore this con in the following section after discussing the pros and cons of the goblins. And speaking of that, let's delve into the commonly accepted explanation for the goblins. Skeptics of this story have often resorted to the usual explanation of owls when it comes to creatures like these. And yes, I said owls. Now, if you've watched my Mothman deep dive, which I really suggest you go give that a watch, it's the first video on the channel. It's probably not perfect, it's probably not fantastic, but it is the first video and I'm super proud of it. But if you have watched it, or you go back and watch it, I believe in that video I speak about the fact that owls are commonly stated to be the Mothman. Like, it's common to attribute the owl to the entire Mothman phenomenon, along with the sandhill crane. Now, when it comes to the Kelly Hopkinsville case specifically, the great horned owl is considered the prime suspect behind the entire phenomenon. So, as before, let's examine some of the pros and cons associated with this theory. And obviously here, pros going to be for the owls, cons against it. So, pros. The great horned owl does exhibit numerous physical similarities to the goblins. This owl species can reach heights ranging from about 1.5 to nearly 3 feet tall, and it does possess a sizable round head that has 2 large yellow eyes. Additionally, its elongated legs come to a formidable set of talons, which could be misconstrued as the claws of a supernatural being. Furthermore, the tufts of feathers present on both sides of the owl's head may provide an explanation for the giant ears depicted on the goblins. As is typical for nearly all owl species, the great horned owl is primarily active during the nighttime. The reported invasion incident commenced around 8 p.m. that evening, which was well after the sunset in that region of Kentucky, suggesting that these owls would have actually been active during that time. Now, owls are fascinating creatures because they have evolved to fly silently to be efficient hunters. If the beings observed were simply owls, it could potentially explain the floating and hovering motion described by the witnesses, as well as the creature's silence during the encounter. Moreover, great horned owls are indigenous to Kentucky and are frequently encountered in densely wooded or rural regions, much like the surroundings of Kelly. Also, these owls have been observed to display aggression and may even attack humans if they perceive a threat to their nest. However, it is important to note that this aspect also presents a counter-argument and a con against this theory. Speaking of which, let's get into the cons. As previously mentioned, the great horned owls are known to attack humans if they perceive a threat to their nests, especially when there are chicks present. This explanation raises significant doubts regarding its plausibility. Firstly, it would be an unusual time of year for the owls to be defending their nests, as the typical nesting season for this species occurs from January to February. After the eggs are laid, they typically hatch around 4 weeks later, and the chicks remain in the nest for a maximum of 2 months. This suggests that, at the latest, the owls would have had chicks present in late May or early June, nearly 2 months prior to the date of August 21st. So with that, I'm sure the next question for many of you would be, could and or would they still attack without chicks present? The answer to that question? Yes. But it is highly unlikely for several reasons in the context of this particular case. For instance, it is generally assumed that there were 2 goblins, possibly up to 4. This theory would require that 2 or more of these owls be involved in the supposed attack, which is less plausible given the territorial nature of the great horned owls within close enough distance to attack the farmhouse, and that is practically an impossibility. Apart from nesting seasons, the great horned owl is a solitary and fiercely territorial creature. It is believed that a single great horned owl has a home range of approximately 1.5 miles or 2.4 kilometers. Therefore, if the Suttons had mistaken an owl for the goblins, it raises the question of how nearly every witness that night reported seeing 2 creatures simultaneously. I'm laughing because I'm sorry if I'm just like these facts are coming at you quick. I did kind of go complete owl biologist for this section. So, considering the solitary and territorial nature of this owl, it would be nearly impossible for multiple individuals of the species to be present together. However, if you're still unconvinced, I've got a few more points to make on the con side, because I'm sure you all just want to hear me yell about owls more. As discussed in the pros section of the owl theory, these owls do share some physical similarities with the goblins, but they are not a complete and exact match. Witnesses describe the goblins as having silver or metallic-like skin and or clothes, which does not align with the typical coloration of great horned owls. Typically, these owls are gray or brown in color, and their facial disc has more of a reddish tone. Additionally, while these owls do have large yellow eyes, it is important to note that their eyes do not exhibit a glowing effect, which was a distinctive feature and a very important part of the appearance of the goblins. The Suttons and the others present that night were individuals from a rural background and likely would have been quite familiar with the appearance of owls. Billy Ray Taylor and Lucky Sutton, who, if you'll remember, were the most active participants during the encounter, were both avid hunters and likely had a good understanding of the wildlife within Kentucky. Their background as avid hunters raises another question in relation to the owl theory. If these creatures were indeed owls, how is it possible that Billy Ray and Lucky failed to hit any of them despite their numerous attempts? Furthermore, considering that both men as well as J.C. Sutton claim to have struck the creatures, it is puzzling that no feathers, blood, or owl remains were found during the investigation. Also, if these are owls, that does not describe the metallic reverberation noise that was present whenever the bullet struck these creatures. So, for the sake of yet another argument, let's imagine that the goblins were indeed owls and that Billy Ray and Lucky missed every shot they took. Let's also consider the possibility that these owls were nesting at the time. In that case, it raises the question of why would they choose to attack the family specifically on the night of August 21st, 1955. If the owls perceived the family as a threat, one would expect them to display aggressive behavior both before and after that day, rather than singling out that particular night. But with that, I'm going to segue into my conclusion and give my thoughts on the owl theory and what I believed happened that night. Hey, this is future editing, cryptic, or Kobe, whatever you want to call me, but as I'm recording this, or as I'm editing this, sorry, I realized I never talked about the glowing green stain that was on the ground that was found during the initial investigation. I don't mention it in this section, nor in my conclusion or my thoughts in this video, because I might have completely forgotten about it while I was recording. But I did do some looking after I figured out that I forgot to do that part, and it seems like the most likely explanation for that. Well, actually, if you want to talk about, like, in the context of this being aliens, my theory was, when I was researching it, is that possibly this could have been some type of blood from the creature, or just something along those lines. But if you want to look for a naturalistic explanation, apparently there's something called foxfire, which is some sort of glowing fungus that grows on, like, decaying wood. But that doesn't make much sense because the stain was just on the ground, according to the investigation. And also, when they came back the next day, it wasn't there anymore. But according to what I researched on Foxfire just a few minutes ago, if there's any sort of sunlight, even a flashlight, anything, that kind of like pollutes the luminescence of this fungus, there's no more glowing, and it just looks like a normal mushroom or fungus or whatever you want to call it. So if you want to get the alien theory, possibly blood, naturalistic theory, possibly foxfire. But yeah, I just want to throw that in there because I realized I forgot it while I was editing this. So when it comes to the Kelly Hopkinsville encounter, I approach the research with an open mind, sort of striving to avoid biases and maintain a rational thought process. And throughout my investigation, I found myself being pulled in different directions considering various theories and the supposed evidence. However, despite the extensive research, I must admit that my conclusion is rather anticlimactic. The truth is, I don't have a definitive answer for what happened that night. I know that for most people, the answer of "I don't know" is heavily considered to be what makes paranormal study and research intriguing. However, that is what I both love and hate about paranormal study. In my theories and research and conclusions, when it comes to like my final thoughts and all that about the phenomena we explore on the channel, we talk about, I try to provide you with like my clear conclusion and my answer for it. Like my last Jersey Devil video, the video just before this one, which I highly recommend you all go have a watch, have a look at. I think it's a really good video. It's my return video after being gone for so long. But I'm gonna get into a little bit of a spoiler here if you haven't watched that video, so I would highly recommend you go watch it before I get into this. But yeah, in that one, by the end, obviously, if you watched it, you know at the end I said my conclusion is that more than likely Jersey Devil is a case of mass hysteria. And while I can't say that 100%, that is what I believe and what I think. But when it comes to this case, there simply isn't enough evidence to definitively support one explanation over the other. And as I just mentioned in the last section there, I'm going to touch here again on the owl and shooting star explanation because I need to yell about this more. So, I was already well aware of this theory and explanation, and before you get the bad idea that maybe I just hate owls, I do hate them in the paranormal field because they get blamed for a lot of things like the Mothman stuff. Any flying creature or anything with big doofy ears, usually owls are to blame for it. As for me hating owls, it couldn't be more opposite. Actually, one of my favorite animals, I actually have a tattoo up here of one, but this just kind of drives me nuts every time I see it. So, as I said, I was well aware of this theory and explanation for the encounter before I even began the outline for this video. But I still attempted to approach the subject rationally and without picking sides before I knew all of the facts. So, imagine you're me, and imagine my complete surprise when, by the end, the shooting star and owl theory landed me at a crossroads where those explanations make good cases for misidentification by the Suttons, but they also have so many inconsistencies and near impossibilities that they undermine themselves as well. Now, to get even more insane, which is just going to be what this channel is going to be a documentary on the just degradation of me. I mean, look at me now. Go back to my first video and then come back here and look at me. I look like a completely different person. I look disheveled. And it's just going to get worse as I continue these videos because I'm just going to get more crazy with my theories. But just humor me for a second. So I'm going to present a rather unconventional theory because, in my opinion, it is unsatisfying and unlikely to have one of these events without the other. So, let's consider this scenario. What if the supposed craft was a shooting star, but the goblins were actually unidentified creatures? Wouldn't that be a major coincidence for them to show up after Billy Ray claimed to see a UFO? On the opposite side of that, let's consider the other scenario. What if the supposed craft really was a UFO, but the goblins were nothing more than owls? This version obviously does open the door to the idea that if they saw a genuine UFO, they would then believe they were under siege by alien invaders. However, it's important to take into account that Billy Ray was the only one who saw the UFO, and when he attempted to tell the family, they all ignored him and figured he was pulling their legs. basically what I'm trying to get at here is that it's difficult for me to envision one of these events occurring without the other. I feel rather compelled to either fully embrace one or the other without being able to find a satisfactory middle ground. For that reason, my personal conclusion to this story is a resounding I don't know. Ugh, God, I'm starting to lose my voice from yelling about owls, but with that, I have reached the end of my outline when it comes to the theories surrounding the encounter. Now, similar to my experience with the Jersey Devil video, I believe this would be a straightforward investigation, and this would be the short video I was talking about doing in between the next big one, which I'll talk a little bit about here in a minute. But when it comes to me thinking that these are going to be quick videos, I'm now 0-2 when it comes to that thought. Now, I can't recall the exact moment that initially got me interested in this story, but it has been several years since I had first heard about it. Recently, I rediscovered it while watching one of those low-budget paranormal shows on the Travel Channel, which I absolutely love, by the way. I know a lot of people think they're trash TV, and they definitely are. They're very low-tier trash TV, as most things on TV are. But I still enjoy them. I enjoy watching Ghost Adventures. I enjoy watching Zach Bagans yell about things that I don't know what he's talking about and trying to fight ghosts. But yeah, I like watching all those shows. And like I said, it's why I rediscovered this case. I can't remember what show I was watching specifically, but whatever show it was, it has obviously led us to you all watching this right now and me screaming at a camera for an hour, or however long this video ends up being. But to be honest, I have developed a genuine fascination for this story, and very thoroughly enjoyed the research process. Rather annoyingly, it is important to acknowledge that, like many paranormal subjects that I will probably end up covering, or any paranormal subject to ever exist, the Kelly Hopkinsville encounter is surrounded by multiple sources, varying versions of the story, and even straight up falsehoods, fabrications, and just incorrect information. In constructing my outline and creating this video, I made every effort to piece together the story as accurately as possible, relying on reliable and matching information. Despite my best efforts, it is entirely possible and almost guaranteed that there are still inaccuracies in the information I have presented to you all right now. When it comes to that, it is important to acknowledge that the true account of what happened that night resides solely with the 11 individuals that were present in that farmhouse in Kelly, Kentucky on the night of August 21st, 1955. When they gathered on that night, they thought they were in for a night of rest and relaxation, completely unaware that their lives were about to be changed, and most of them, their lives are about to be ruined forever. But with that is the end of my full outline. I'm just going to kind of talk here for a second. So if you're just here for the Kelly Hopkinsville stuff, it's over now. I'm just going to kind of get a little bit personal here for a moment. Nothing bad happened. I know, like, I don't want my inflection to make it sound like something horrible has happened. In fact, quite the opposite. If you don't follow my social medias, I would highly recommend you go follow them. I'm on both Twitter and on Instagram. Don't expect a huge amount of stuff from me on there. It's mostly just me talking about works in progress or me thanking you all for certain things. And speaking of thanking you all for certain things, put this over here for right now. Thank you all so much for the support on the Jersey Devil video. With me being gone for 11 months, I really didn't... I mean, not 11 months. 11 months was my Mothman video, but 8 or 9 months. I wouldn't have expected such a warm reception coming back. My Mothman video last week, or whenever I released my Jersey Devil video, it was a little over a week ago when I'm recording this, but when I released that, I didn't have huge expectations for it. I'd been away for so long, and I kind of feared that I had lost most of the momentum I was slowly gathering from my older videos, and when I put that video out, I really didn't expect much of it. It was mostly just, honestly, it was mostly for me. I mean, obviously it was for you all, but for me, it was kind of just, put this video out, and I'm back on track to getting back to what I want to do. Um, and it did serve that purpose, but to see you all absolutely crush that video and the new subscribers I got, people that commented, people that liked, all that stuff. Also, if you're watching this video, like, comment, subscribe on this one, help me out. But to see how much you all seem to enjoy that video, it really meant the world to me, and I would have never expected such a warm welcome back. But I'm so glad that you all enjoyed it. You all don't know how much it means to me, and you all are absolute maniacs because my Mothman video, in my break being gone, passed 100 views, and I couldn't have ever expected something like that to happen on my very first video to pass 100 views. And when it came to my last video, the Jersey Devil video, it felt like I was starting all over again. Well, going into it, it felt like I was starting all over again. Like I was gonna have to do all the hard work to get back to, I hadn't gone too far when it came to my YouTube stuff. But at the same time, it felt like I was basically starting over. I refreshed the channel. I have the new name now, which I hope you all enjoy. I love the cryptic name. I hope you all like it too. I think it really is reflective of me, and kind of the stuff that I like. But when that Mothman video hit 100 views, it was absolutely mind-boggling. And to release the Jersey Devil video, which felt like starting anew almost, even though you can still go watch those old 4 videos, and I would highly recommend them. I think they're pretty good. I look a little bit more clean than I do now, but it is what it is. But when I released that Jersey Devil video, to see you all blow past that most viewed video, the Mothman video, within 3 days of the Jersey Devil video being out, and that just blew my mind. It felt unreal. Like, it's sitting now. I just checked it about an hour ago as of recording this. It's at 176 views, and you all have been destroying that video. That is awesome, and I mean destroying in the best way. But I'm so glad that you all enjoyed it. It meant the world to me to come back to such a warm reception, and anyone coming back or anyone here new, any of you all that are here now that want to watch this video or watch that video, watch any of these videos, thank you all so much. And the only thing I have to say is that if you do like these videos, please like, please comment, and please subscribe. I talked about it a little bit in my Jersey Devil video. Eventually, I do want to kind of make this into a second job. So I kind of want to get to the point that maybe later on I can start monetizing these videos. But for now, I'm just doing them for fun, and they're an absolute blast. I've been enjoying doing the outlines. I've been enjoying seeing the reception on the videos. All this, everything that has to do with this right now, I've just been absolutely loving, and I'm hoping that you all are loving it. I'm still kind of upgrading stuff right now to get everything where I am. I just got a new light over here. I don't want to turn my camera in case it breaks something, but I got a new light over here to kind of make the vision less blurry. I know it was a little blurry last time. I'm sorry for the sort of audio and visual problems of the last video. After being away for so long, I think I messed a few things up, but I think the video still did pretty well. I mean, clearly it did pretty well, but I think with that, I'm pretty much gonna leave this here. Last time I'm gonna say it for this video. Please like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed. And yeah. Oh, speaking of which, before you all go, I don't know when this video is coming out. I don't know how long the editing's gonna take, but after this video, I know in my last video I said don't expect me back in 2 weeks, and then this one's probably gonna be 3 weeks after. I don't know when this is coming out, but next video I'm planning is a pretty big one. I don't know how long it's going to take. I already know, now that I know how I do my outlines and how my research goes. The next topic I'm looking into getting into for a video, I know is going to take a while for an outline, so not sure how long I'm going to be gone, but I'm planning a video for late June. I know that's a month away, or once again, I don't know when this is coming out, but there's a video coming out in late June that's going to coincide with a event that I'm going to be attending. I'm not going to be a part of it or anything, but It's just going to coincide with the event that's going on near my area. But that video should be coming out late June. That's all I'm really going to say about it. So whether or not this other video that I'm planning, besides that one, this was come out late June, whether that one ends up taking a shorter or longer amount of time, plan on a video late June. There's one I'm planning for late June that should be an absolute must. So if I don't see you before then, hopefully I do see you before then, but if I don't see you before then, thank you all again for watching, and I will see you all hopefully soon.